My name is David. I'm 85 years old, and the road I've walked has been anything but easy. I've lived through deep sorrow, faced unimaginable hardship, experienced the sting of hunger, the fear of homelessness, and the loneliness of carrying burdens no teenager should bear. But I've also tasted the sweetness of small victories, the joy of lifting someone I love out of darkness, and the deep fulfillment that comes from building something from nothing. This story I'm about to tell you, it's not made up, not polished for entertainment. It's raw, real, and it's mine. You won't hear tales of overnight success or lucky breaks. You'll hear about grit. You'll hear about promises made in silence, about failures that shattered me, and about the days I couldn't see a future but moved forward anyway. Why am I telling you this now? Because I believe that somewhere out there, someone is standing where I once stood, feeling like life is too hard, too unfair. Maybe that someone is you. Maybe you're wondering if it's even worth trying anymore. I'm here to tell you, it is. Because I've seen how far someone can go when they decide they won't quit. I've lived the transformation that happens when a broken heart becomes a burning purpose. And I want you to feel that fire too. This isn't just a story. It's a map. And if you listen closely, you'll see that your journey, no matter how broken it feels right now, has the power to become something extraordinary. Not because life will get easier, but because you will get stronger. Let's begin. I was just 16 when my entire world came crashing down in a way I never imagined. It started out like any other day, a sleepy morning, a dull classroom, and my eyes half lost in the world outside the window. I remember watching the breeze flicker through the branches of a nearby tree and thinking how slowly time was passing. I was counting the minutes to the lunch bell, planning what I'd eat, thinking maybe I'd get to laugh with my friends today, maybe I'd go home and surprise my mom with a silly drawing I made the night before. Then everything changed. The classroom door creaked open. Our teacher stopped mid-sentence. I looked up and saw our school principal standing in the doorway. His face, pale, tight, unreadable, told me something was wrong. Deeply wrong. He gestured toward me. I stood up, confused, thinking maybe I was in trouble or someone had come to pick me up early. As we walked down the corridor, he didn't say a word. The silence between us grew heavier with each step. We reached his office. He closed the door gently, sat across from me, and placed both hands on his desk. Then he looked me in the eyes and said something that shattered my entire being. "David, I'm so sorry. There's been an accident. Your parents, they didn't make it." I felt the floor disappear beneath me. Time slowed. My ears rang. For a moment I truly thought he was lying, or that maybe I was dreaming. How could it be? Just yesterday morning, I hugged my mom before she left. Just last night, my dad helped me fix my broken bike chain. And now, they were gone. Gone? I couldn't speak. I didn't cry. Not then. Not in front of him. Something inside me just shut off, like a breaker flipping in a storm. The walk home that day felt like an eternity. Every step was heavy, surreal. My body moved on its own, but my mind was frozen, still trying to rewind the world to a version where that conversation had never happened. When I arrived home, the house was too quiet. No smell of cooking. No clatter of dishes. No warmth. And then I saw her. Sarah. my little sister. 7 years old. Her cheeks rosy, her hair in a messy ponytail, holding a crayon in one hand and a book in the other. She saw me and ran up to hug me. "Where's Mommy? Where's Daddy?" she asked with a smile. That smile crushed me. What do you say to a child who doesn't even understand what death really means? What words can possibly prepare someone so innocent for something so devastating? I knelt down. I looked into her eyes. But the words wouldn't come. My lips trembled. My throat tightened. So I just hugged her. I held her as tightly as I could, hoping somehow she would understand through my embrace that something had changed, forever. That night Sarah cried herself to sleep in my arms. I didn't. Not because I wasn't in pain, but because I couldn't afford to fall apart. She needed me. Someone had to be the adult now. And somehow, that someone had to be me. From that night forward, I became more than just a big brother. I became her protector, her parent, her anchor. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would do whatever it took to keep her safe. I had a younger sister, Sarah. She was only 7. She didn't understand what death meant. When I came home that night, she ran into my arms and asked, "Where's Mommy? Where's Daddy?" I didn't know how to answer. That night, I held her while she cried herself to sleep. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I had to be strong for her. From that moment on, I knew I had a mission: protect her, raise her, somehow survive. With no relatives to help, no inheritance, and barely any savings, I found myself at a crossroads most people never expect to face at 16. The decision wasn't noble or courageous, it was survival. I had to drop out of school. Not because I didn't care about education, I loved learning, but because we couldn't afford anything else. School was a luxury I could no longer afford. The next morning, while other kids were packing their backpacks and heading off to classrooms, I walked into the back alley of a diner and begged for work. I started washing dishes, my hands soaked in soap water, fingers wrinkled and raw from scrubbing pans. I didn't even know how to hold a sponge properly at first, but I learned fast. There was no other choice. When that shift ended, I walked to a construction site and asked if they needed anyone to carry bricks or sweep the lot. They gave me a chance, not out of kindness, but because I was cheap labor. I didn't complain. I just worked. From sunup to sundown. Sometimes, I would clean streets late into the evening. The work was filthy and thankless. My back ached, my hands were calloused, and my shoes were falling apart. But each time I closed my eyes, all I could see was Sarah's face, smiling, asking me what we'd eat tomorrow. That smile gave me strength. Some days there just wasn't enough food for both of us. I told Sarah I had already eaten, when in reality I hadn't touched a thing. I watched her devour her tiny bowl of rice with such innocence, and that made every hunger pang I felt worthwhile. We lived in a tiny room at the back of an old building. No heater, no kitchen, just cracked walls and a mattress on the floor. During winter, the cold bit through our clothes. I used to wrap Sarah in my jacket and hold her close so she could sleep, even if I shivered all night. At night, while the city slept, I'd sit by our small window and stare out into the streetlights. I was too tired to cry, too exhausted to dream. But deep inside, a quiet fire began to burn. I started asking myself hard questions. Was this going to be our life forever? Was I destined to work these jobs for the rest of my existence? Would Sarah grow up believing this was all there was? That's when I made the promise. I will not let this be our life. I will not let Sarah believe that poverty is her destiny. I don't know how. I don't know when. But I will change this. That promise became my fuel. It was the one thing I could cling to in a world that had taken everything else from me. From that moment forward, every job I worked, every dollar I saved, every book I borrowed from the local library, even when I could barely keep my eyes open, was done with that mission in mind, to rise not just for me, but for her. At night, I sat in silence, too tired to sleep. Was this it? Was this what life had in store for us? One night, I made a vow to myself and to my little sister. I said, I won't let this be our life. I will change it. No matter what. That promise changed everything. I started thinking differently. I stopped complaining about what I didn't have and focused on what I could do. One day, after months of working long hours, sometimes doing 3 jobs in a single day, a man I worked for began to notice something different about me. His name was Mr. Roberts. He owned a small supply shop near the market. I cleaned the storefront, stocked the shelves, and sometimes even helped count stock at the end of the day. I never complained. I showed up early. I left late. I kept my head down and worked with everything I had. Mr. Roberts, a stern but observant man in his 60s, was the kind of person who didn't speak much, but when he did, you listened. One late evening, after closing up the shop, he pulled me aside. He said, David, I've seen how you work. You don't just show up, you care. That matters. I didn't know what to say. No adult had spoken to me like that in a long time, not with respect, not with recognition. He continued, How would you feel about taking on more responsibility? Maybe managing the weekend inventory and helping with the monthly bookkeeping? I was stunned. Me? A 16-year-old dropout managing part of a business? I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. That opportunity wasn't just a job promotion. It was the first spark of belief that maybe, just maybe, I could be more than just a survivor. Maybe I could be a builder, a planner, someone who made things happen. That moment changed me. I started dressing a little better, walking a little straighter. I took notes on everything. How he spoke to customers, how he negotiated prices, how he balanced profit and loss. I stayed after hours to ask questions, and he answered them patiently, even when I didn't fully understand. Looking back, Mr. Roberts didn't just give me a job. He gave me a mirror in which I could see a version of myself I hadn't imagined yet, a capable young man, worthy of trust and responsibility. That was the first real break I'd ever had. And it lit a fire in me that never went out. It gave me confidence. It made me believe that maybe, just maybe, I could build something of my own. Eventually, I saved enough money to start a tiny business. I poured everything into it. And then, I lost it all. The project failed. Every coin I had was gone. That night, I sat alone in our small, dimly lit room, the silence so heavy it felt like it was pressing down on my chest. The walls, already bare and cracked, seemed to close in a little more than usual. I had just come back from the supplier's office, where I'd been told that the project I invested in wasn't going to continue. My business, my first real chance, was dead before it even had a chance to breathe. I remember staring at the floor, trying to make sense of it all. The money was gone. All those nights of sacrifice. All the hopes I had tied to that small venture vanished like smoke in the wind. My hands trembled as I rubbed my forehead, wondering how I was going to tell Sarah. Wondering how I was going to get up tomorrow and face the world again. And then she walked in, Sarah, my little anchor. She clutched her favorite stuffed bear to her chest, her pajamas a size too small, her hair messy from sleep. She looked at me with those big, innocent eyes that hadn't yet been dulled by hardship. She asked quietly, "Are we going to be okay, brother?" That question hit harder than any financial loss ever could. It broke through the fog of doubt and pierced straight to my soul. I looked up at her, and despite the weight on my shoulders, I forced a smile. I reached out, pulled her into my arms, and whispered, "Yes. We always will." And the truth is, I believed it. Not because I had a plan. Not because I knew how we'd recover. But because I knew that if I gave up right then, if I let that failure define us, then everything I'd promised would mean nothing. I had to believe, even if it hurt. Because Sarah was watching. And if I could show her how to stand back up after being knocked down, maybe that would be the most important lesson I could ever teach her. That failure taught me more than success ever could. In that silence, after the collapse, I sat down with a notebook and began retracing every decision I had made. I asked myself brutally honest questions. Where did I go wrong? Did I trust the wrong people? Did I move too fast? Did I invest without understanding the risks? The answers hurt, but they taught me. I realized I had jumped into business without fully understanding how cash flow worked, how to negotiate with suppliers, how to read a simple balance sheet. I had confused passion with preparation. And that mistake cost me everything. But instead of letting that shame consume me, I made a decision. I was going to become a student of life. I borrowed books from the local library. Business fundamentals, marketing, personal finance, leadership, and mindset. I devoured them. I carried a book with me everywhere, on buses, during lunch breaks, even while waiting in lines. I started keeping a journal of lessons, principles I could refer back to. I watched free business talks at the community center. Listened to old men at the park share stories of their careers, asked every shopkeeper I knew how they managed their stores. I treated the world like a classroom, and every person, every interaction, became a potential lesson. I also started seeking out mentors, not rich executives or fancy entrepreneurs, but hardworking, experienced people who knew how to survive and thrive in small ways. There was Mrs. Patel, the widow who ran a tiny tea stall and saved every penny. There was Mr. Kim, the mechanic who never lost a customer because he treated everyone with respect. I listened to them. I wrote down what they said. And as I learned, something started to shift. I stopped seeing myself as a victim of my circumstances. I started seeing myself as someone who was building brick by brick, lesson by lesson, day by day. I wasn't just getting smarter. I was getting wiser, tougher, and more deliberate. Failure had been my greatest teacher. And I was becoming an excellent student. Each failure was a lesson in disguise. And with each lesson, I got stronger. I tried again. And again. I kept learning, improving, adapting. I built another small business, and this time, it worked, not because it was a brilliant idea, but because I was different. I applied what I had learned. I was more careful with money. I negotiated better deals. I kept my overhead low and my customer relationships strong. The business was modest at first, a small mobile food cart selling homemade sandwiches near a construction site. But I treated it like a Fortune 500 company. I tracked every cent. I greeted every customer with respect. I asked for feedback. I refined the menu based on what sold best. I woke up at 4 a.m. to prepare, and didn't rest until everything was packed away by evening. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And it was growing. Eventually, I added a second cart. Then a third. I hired help, other kids from the neighborhood who were struggling, just like I had. I trained them, mentored them, taught them everything I had learned. We became a team, a family. And together, we pushed forward. One afternoon, I walked past a community center offering free seminars. Something about the words, business and mindset development, caught my eye. I almost kept walking. After all, I was tired, sweaty, and just wanted to go home. But something told me to step inside. That seminar changed my life. The speaker, a man who had built a logistics company from scratch, said something that would echo in my mind for years. Success isn't about luck. It's about mindset. The moment you believe that your effort matters more than your environment, you become unstoppable. That hit me like lightning. I realized then that my journey hadn't been about waiting for the right opportunity. It was about preparing myself so that when any opportunity came, I'd be ready. It wasn't about luck. It was about making my own luck through grit, humility, and relentless learning. I began investing more into myself, reading, networking, attending more workshops, studying marketing, understanding customer psychology. I reinvested every bit of profit back into growing the business, slowly scaling from carts to a small storefront. And though there were many more failures ahead, bad hires, a fire that damaged my kitchen, economic downturns, I now saw each obstacle as part of the process. Each problem wasn't a sign to quit. It was a test of my commitment. Years went by. I built multiple food locations. I expanded into delivery services, catering, and eventually opened a small chain of eateries across the state. My name started appearing in local business articles. Banks began calling me to offer credit lines. Customers brought their families and told stories of how they had started eating at my cart years ago. And then, one day, I saw it. My bank account hit a number I had only ever seen in dreams. I was officially a millionaire. But the moment didn't feel like fireworks. It felt quiet, peaceful, and deeply emotional. Because it wasn't about the money. It was about what that number represented. Every cent symbolized a sleepless night, a missed meal, a lesson learned, a failure overcome. I walked into Sarah's apartment that evening. Yes, apartment. She was grown by now. A beautiful, brilliant young woman pursuing her degree in education. She was sitting at her desk, helping a group of underprivileged kids with their homework. And I stood there silently for a moment, watching her. This was my victory. Not the money. Not the articles. Not the awards. her. I kept my promise. I gave her a life worth living. A life where she could choose her own future instead of fighting for her next meal. When she looked up and saw me, I smiled and said, "We made it, Sarah." She smiled back. "Yes, we did, David." And in that moment, all the pain, all the struggle, it made sense. Because everything I had gone through was worth it. Looking back, I realized that the journey taught me more than any textbook ever could. Not just about business, but about life. Real life. The kind that breaks you down and builds you back stronger if you let it. Here are the lessons I live by. 1. Time is your most valuable asset. More valuable than money, more precious than gold. You can always make more money, but you can never get time back. Every minute you waste is a minute you'll never see again. If you want to build something meaningful, start now, not tomorrow, not next year, now. 2. Surround yourself with the right people. You're a reflection of the company you keep. If you're constantly around people who complain, blame others, or make excuses, you'll start doing the same. But if you find people who dream big, who push through pain, who keep going, you'll begin to rise with them. 3. Discipline beats motivation. Motivation is like a spark, it gets you started. But discipline is the firewood. It's what keeps you going on the days when everything feels like it's falling apart. 4. Don't compare your journey to others. Everyone starts at a different point. Some are born with resources, others aren't. But what matters is how you play the hand you're dealt. Focus on your path, your progress, your growth. 5. Dream big, but act small. Big dreams can feel overwhelming. But if you take one small step every single day, eventually, you'll look up and realize how far you've come. 6. Pain is a part of growth. Failure, loss, heartbreak, they're not detours. They're the road. Let them shape you, not stop you. 7. Never forget why you started. When the journey gets tough, and it will, remember your why. For me, it was Sarah. For you, it might be your parents, your future kids, your dignity, your desire to make something beautiful out of the pain. I tell you this story not because I want praise or admiration. I tell it because I know what it feels like to be where you might be right now, alone, afraid, unsure if the dream is worth chasing. But let me tell you something I learned over and over again. The dream is always worth it. You don't need to have all the answers to begin. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need permission. What you need is a reason, and the willingness to take the first step, no matter how small. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, "But I've failed too many times." Good. That means you're still in the game. Every failure carries within it the seed of your next breakthrough. Maybe you think, "I'm too old," or "I'm too young," or "I've missed my chance." You haven't. If you're still breathing, your story's not over. The only way to lose is to give up. And if there's one thing I hope you take from my life, it's this: keep going. Keep building. Keep falling and getting back up. Keep dreaming even when it hurts. Because one day, you'll look back and realize that you didn't just change your own life, you changed the lives of those around you. Your children, your community, maybe even someone you never met who just heard your story. At 85 years old, I can say this with absolute certainty. What makes life beautiful isn't the money, or the titles, or the recognition. It's the journey. the sweat. The nights you almost gave up but didn't. The people you lift up along the way. I don't remember every dollar I made. But I remember every moment that tested me. Every smile I helped put on Sarah's face. Every young person I mentored. Every quiet victory that nobody saw but meant the world to me. Now it's your turn. You have time. You have talent. You have a story waiting to be written. So go write it. Make it powerful. Make it honest. Make it yours. And remember, your life isn't about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about making every moment the perfect one. Your story begins the moment you decide to take the first step. Don't wait for life to happen. Make life happen. Make every second count. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Epic English Stories channel for more tips and strategies on learning English. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Together, let's make reading in English a fun and fulfilling part of your language.